Hi guys, welcome to Tactic Devs. In this video, we take a look at commands in WPF. I will try my best to explain what commands are and why they are useful. Now, commanding is an input system in WPF that provides a way of handling user inputs. These inputs can range from interactions with the UI, like clicking a button, to keyboard and mouse inputs. Now, the usual way of dealing with events raised by UI elements, let's say when a button is clicked, for example, we usually deal with such events by attaching event handlers. Now, there are times when we want to write applications that invoke the same action from multiple UI elements. This tends to increase the number of event handlers. Now, at this point, let's take a look at an example application that demonstrates the use of commands. For this example, we have a simple application. Now let's say this application was a document viewer and it had a print function that allows us to print that document. Now if we wanted to invoke the print action, we could do it in a couple ways. So we could just click File, then select Print, and that would invoke the print action. We could also press Ctrl P on the keyboard, and that would also invoke the action. Lastly, we could just right click, then select Print from the drop down menu, and that would also invoke the print action. So this application demonstrates the use of commands. So we are interacting with the UI as well as pressing the keyboard, and we're getting the same result. So these UI elements as well as keyboard inputs are being directed to the same logic. Now, if we tried to use event handlers to implement such an application, that would require us to write 3 separate handlers to handle the inputs from the 3 different sources. So one handler would be for the menu, one for the keyboard shortcut input, and the other one would be for the context menu. Now, using commands resolves this issue by simply associating one command with a single event handler. So by using commands, we can bound multiple UI elements to the same logic and invoke this single command from these UI elements. So therefore, commands actually reduce the clutter and the amount of code that we need to write, and actually improves the clarity of the code. So let's go to Visual Studio to explore more about commands. Now here in Visual Studio, we take a look at the inner workings of the command system. Now at the core of the command system is an interface called the iCommand interface. Now we can take a look at its members by navigating to its definition. Now here we see that it has 3 members, an event and 2 methods. The event is the canExecuteChanged event. Here we have the canExecute method and the execute method. Now fortunately, WPF has got 2 classes that implement this interface, and that's the routed UI command class, and we also have another class which is the routed command class. Now let's navigate to the routed command class. Now here in the routed command class, you can tell that the class implements the iCommand interface as well as adds in some extra members to the class. Now we have 3 of them. We have input gestures, name, and owner type. Now input gesture is a collection, and it stores objects that associate an instance of a command to certain input gestures. Now there are 2 types of input gestures. You have keyboard and mouse input gestures. Now suppose you wanted to associate a certain keyboard shortcut or keyboard input to a command, you can just add that here. Now here we have a name and owner type. Here we have an event which is the canExecuteChanged event, and this event is raised when a specific flag is changed, and it's a boolean, and that's that flag is the can execute flag. Now basically what happens is you can specify whether the command is enabled or disabled. So when you change between the enabled and disabled state, this event will be executed. Now here we have three constructors. The first one takes no parameters. So simply you can create an instance of this command class without specifying any input gestures, name and owner type. Here it allows us to specify the name as well as some input gestures. Now at the bottom here we have two methods, which is the can execute, and they also take different parameters here. So for the can execute method and the can and the execute method, these in themselves do not run any application logic, but rather raise events, and those events will bubble up the UI tree looking for an object that contains a command binding. Now I'll explain on that later. Now WPF has got predefined commands that we can actually make use of. Now if these commands do not meet your application needs, you can go ahead and create a custom command. Now these are found in 6 different classes, and that's we have the first one, which is the application commands, then component, editing, media, navigation, and system commands. Now let's look at the application commands here. Now these commands are specified in a static class, and they are actually static instances. We have copy, find, help, open, etc. So if you have an application and it has a help function, then you do not need to create your own custom command class. So basically you can just use this pre-existing command. Okay, so that's one of the classes that contains these commands. Now the rest you can examine them by yourself. Now here I'll go to the main window.xaml file, and I'll implement a simple UI to demonstrate a command. So I'll go ahead by adding in a menu, and I'll add in a small menu item here. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so here in the UI, I have a menu, and I have specified a menu item and set its header to a string file. So when this item is clicked, a pop-up menu will open here containing another item. And here we can see that's the menu item that I've specified here. Now I'll go ahead and implement a command. So I'll set its property, which is the command property. I'll set it to the open command. Now this open command is defined in the application commands class. So I'll just use a pre-existing command. Now notice how this menu item has a property called command. So this means this menu item is capable of invoking a command. Now every class that's capable of invoking a command must implement an interface called the iCommand source interface. So I'll go ahead and copy this, and here in the code behind I'll just paste it. Now let's navigate to this class definition. Okay, so now here we see that it actually implements the iSource command, and this gives it the ability to be able to invoke a command. Now the button class also implements the iSource interface. So if you want to create a custom control that can invoke a command, you can just implement the iCommand source interface. Okay, so on this menu item, I assigned the command property to the open command. So what happens is when this item is clicked, an event will be raised that will bubble up the UI tree looking for an object that has got a command binding. Now this command binding can be set on the grid or the window or the menu item. In this example, I'll set it on the window. So here I'll specify saying window, then I'll access its command bindings collection. Now every class that inherits from the UI element class has got a property called command bindings, and this is a collection that holds command binding objects. So that includes the grid, menu, and all the controls that we have available. So I'll go ahead and specify a command binding. And I'm going to assign its command property to the same command I specified, which is the open command. Now this command binding object has got an event, which is the can execute event. Now I'm going to set a new event handler, and it also has another event called the executed event. So I'll set a handler for this event as well. So what will happen is when we click this, it will bubble up, and if it finds this command binding and the command property matches this command, it will execute the can execute event handler first. So when this event handler sets the flag to determine whether this command is enabled or disabled, so if it's enabled, it will then execute this executed event handler. So let's go to the code behind. Okay, I'll get rid of this. Now here we see the two event handlers. Now here, the first one that's going to be executed is this one here. Now we're going to use this parameter that was returned, which is the E, and this is the can execute routed events argument. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a property which is the can execute. Okay, so I'll set it to true. So by setting this to true, it simply specifies that this command, which is the open command, is now enabled. But if I set it to false, it means it's disabled and it won't be executed. Now here in the executed, this is where I now implement the logic I want to execute whenever this command is invoked. Now in this example, I'm going to create a window, a main window class, and I'll just say window, and I'll create an instance of this window. So basically, when the command is executed, it'll create a new window, and then it's going to show that window. So by executing the show method on the window class, so that means a new window will pop up and will appear. Okay, so I'll go ahead and test this application. Okay, so we have the application running. I'll go ahead and expand this window. Now here we have a menu item, which is file. I'll go ahead and click it. Now notice that we have another item here, and it already has its header set to open, and it has a shortcut also indicated there. Now when I was implementing this menu item, I only specified the command. How come here we have a text which is open and it indicates the shortcut here? Now in the routed UI command, we examined that it had a text property. So this UI element, which is the menu item, extracted that text property and set it to its header. And here we see it has a shortcut, which is Ctrl-O. So this means that when the open command was being created, or when the instance was implemented, in this case by the WPF team, they had associated the open command with a certain keyboard gesture. In this case, it's Control O. Now, the reason for that is we know that most open commands have Control O as their keyboard shortcut. So I'll go ahead and click this item, and we see it executes the code that we specified. I'll do the same for this new instance, and it opens up. I'll close these two windows. Now what I'm going to do is I'll press Control and then O on the keyboard, and it also creates an instance of the window. So here we are invoking the open command by clicking on this item, as well as by pressing the keyboard inputs. Now I'll go ahead and close this. Now, as I mentioned earlier on, that the can execute will be executed first, and this is used to set a flag on this property. Now we had set it to true earlier on. Now this time I'll set it to false. I'll go ahead and test the app. Okay, so it's up and running. I'll go and click this menu item here. Now notice how that this item is now disabled. Now the menu item has got internal logic that will look for this can execute boolean value on the command that we specified, and if it finds that the value has been set to false, it's just going to disable itself. So it's just disabled itself here, so we can't actually execute this command. Now I'll try clicking the keyboard by pressing Alt and then O, and nothing happens because that command has been disabled. So I'll go ahead and close this. Okay, so here we specified a command which is the open command, and this is an inbuilt command that we are making use of here. Now we specified the command bindings, and we set the two events and assign them event handlers. Now I'll go ahead and demonstrate how to create a custom command. So I'll create a static class that's going to hold a single instance of the routed UI command class. So I'll go ahead and say add, then class. Now I'll just name it my command. Okay, so I'll set this class to a static class, and within the class I'm going to define a static property. And this property will be of the type routed UI command, which is found in the system Windows input namespace. So I'll add that namespace at the top. So it's a routed UI command class. This one allows us to set a text property. I'll set it to a static member, and I'll give it a name. I'll say hello. So this will be the hello command. Now here, this is just a field. I haven't created an instance. So I'll create a static constructor. So within this constructor, I'll initialize this field. Now here we have three overloads that we can use. So one specifies a string, which is a text, and name and the owner type. So I'll use this one. So I'll specify a string. So this is a text property, and this text property is used in the UI by certain UI controls. So here I'm just going to specify hi as the text. Then for the name property, I'll just specify hello here like I did. And for the owner type, I'll use this keyword, which is the type of. So this keyword will return the type of the class that I'm going to specify here. So in this case, we have the my commands class. So this is the owner of this command. So I'll specify it there. And that's it. So we have a command. It has a text property hi, and its name is hello, and it belongs to the my commands class. Now here I do not specify any input gestures. So this command doesn't have any input gestures associated to it. So basically we can't use shortcuts on this command. So I'll go ahead and go to the main window here. And now I'll get rid of this open command and replace it with my command that I created. Now here I just can't specify hello. This is a single name. I need to specify the namespace and the class of my command. Now this one that we have here, which is just open, it's a single name. This is only reserved for inbuilt commands, but for my custom command I have to specify the namespace. So in my case I'll specify it, and that's the local namespace, and it's found in the my commands class, and the name is hello. So this is my command. So I'll copy this and I'll paste it here. Now here it shows a warning. That's because this hasn't been built yet. So I'll go ahead and test this application. We should see it will still execute the same code, which is open in a new window. Okay, so here we have the application running. Now I'll click on this. Now you see the name is now changed to hi, and here we do not have any keyboard input specified. Now hi is being extracted from the text property that we specified in the command. Now here it's disabled, so I'll go ahead and close it. I'll set the flag to true. Now I'll try the application again. Okay, so here it's running and we now see it's enabled. I'll go ahead and click it and we see a new window opens up. Now I'll close it. I'll go back to the my commands class here. Now for this static instance, I'm now going to associate it with an input gesture. Now here I'll use the third constructor, and it takes in an input gesture collection. So I'll create a new input gesture collection. And I'll just give it a name, inputs. I'll create an instance. Now this collection will take in different types of inputs. So in this case, I'm going to create a keyboard gesture input. And this is the key gesture. Now here, I'll give it a name. I'll say shortcut. I'll just give it a name, short key. And I'll say is equal to a new instance. Now here, I can specify the key that I want to associate with the command. It can be a single key on the keyboard, or it can be a combination of two keys, and that would be a key and a modifier key. So in this case, I'm going to add a key and a modifier key. So for the key, I'll specify a key, and I'll take it from the enum. So I'll specify the key E. So this will be a key, and then I'll also specify a modifier key. So from the modifier keys enum, I'll use the modifier control. You can use Alt, Shift, the Windows key. So I'll use Control as the modifier. So here I have a key gesture. Then I'll add this key gesture to the collection. So I'll say inputs, then add, now that this has been added, so I have a collection which has a single key gesture. Now when creating the instance of this command, I'll specify that I want to associate it with this key gesture. So by specifying the collection here, now our command has a key gesture assigned to it. Okay, now let's go to the main window here. Code behind. Okay, we have our code here. So I'll go ahead and test this application. Okay, so the application is up and running, and I'll click here, and we see we now have the text hi and the shortcut key, which is the Control E. So I'll click it, it opens up, and I'll press Control E on the keyboard and it opens up. So what happened here in this example, we just created a custom control, and we specified that we want to set its text property to hi and associate the key gesture here. I can change this to a different name and it will appear in the UI. Now here, if I want, I can explicitly set the header. So I can set it to whatever I want. I can say open new. So I'll set that to the header. I'll go ahead and test this. Okay, so here I'll click the menu item, and we see it overrides the text property I specified. And now the reason for that is because I have specified the header. So in this case, the header property will take priority. But in the case that I do not specify that, it will just take the text property from the command. Okay, so guys, that's it for this video, which is part 1. And what you can do is you can wait for part 2 and quickly have a look at part 2. And remember to subscribe, like, and share this video. I'll see you in the next one.